Welcome to another ridiculous episode of Sex in the Watchtower, where we explore the strange and somewhat disconcerting views of Jehovah's Witnesses on the topic of sex. Today we will be talking about premarital sex. Like, a lot. This video contains explicit subject matter and is not appropriate for work, pets, children, really anyone. Our first article for today is from the Awake magazine in 2004. It's called, "What's Wrong with Premarital Sex?" Nothing. Nothing at all. I sometimes wonder if premarital sex is really that bad, especially when I feel strange for still being a virgin. You know, somehow I think that's not all Jordan feels strange about. Look, Jordan, it's not bad at all. It's pretty damn good, actually, but Watchtower is probably not the best place to express these ideas. Seriously, you're going to get a talking to in the back room if you don't watch out. I feel pressure to experiment with sex. I think we all have the natural inclination to, says Kelly. Everywhere you turn, she continues, it's all about sex. My. Especially if you're a witness, Kelly. Why is it defined as pressure, though? I mean, pressure would imply that someone or something is trying to make you experiment with sex and not necessarily that you want to. I mean, there's a big difference between pressure and natural inclination, isn't there? Also, I kind of wonder where Kelly's turning around at, because if it's all about sex, then she's either in the wrong part of town or in the Kingdom Hall. Can you relate to how Jordan and Kelly feel? No. After all, traditional customs and values that once discouraged premarital sex are all but gone. Guess what? Just because something is considered traditional doesn't mean that it should be considered right. I mean, Chinese foot binding was traditional, and I think we all agree that that shouldn't be done. A survey in one Asian country revealed that the majority of 15 to 24-year-old males felt that premarital intercourse was not only accepted, but expected of them. Gosh, that's just terrible. I mean, hormonal adolescent males might have sex? That is so shocking. Little wonder that throughout the world, most young people have had sex before they reach 19 years of age. Right, because that's how biology works, dingbats. The only difference between the young people they're talking about here and the ones in the Kingdom Hall is that the Jehovah's Witnesses get married at 17 or 18. At least the girls do. Then there are youths who refrain from intercourse but who engage in so-called sexual alternatives, such as fondling one another's sexual organs, sometimes called mutual masturbation. Can anyone explain to me how these are so-called alternatives? I mean, they're actual real-life alternatives to vaginal intercourse, as are oral sex and anal sex. So why are they trying to throw shade on what we call things? And what is so bad about touching somebody as long as you're both of age and you have their full consent? I don't get it. A disturbing report in the New York Times reveals that oral sex has become a commonplace initiation into sexual activity, widely perceived by many young people as less intimate and less risky than intercourse, and as a means of avoiding pregnancy and of preserving their virginity. Why is this considered disturbing? I mean, why is this anybody's business? Seriously. I mean, I do question how oral sex could be less intimate than intercourse. Whatever. Nobody asked me. It is absolutely a viable alternative that doesn't risk pregnancy and doesn't impact one's virginity, if you care about that sort of thing, but I don't know why you would. However, you can still get STDs from oral sex, so you still have to be careful and make good choices. Just how should a Christian view premarital sex? And here's how you should think and feel, everyone. Listen up. And what about so-called alternatives to intercourse? Are they acceptable to God? Because that is, after all, the most important thing to consider in our most intimate encounters. What does the invisible dude in the sky think about it? Are they safe? Well, it depends. But why don't we introduce just a little bit more anxiety into the equation? That's what we need, right? More anxiety? Yeah. And do they really preserve one's virginity? So why is virginity so damn important? Why is this outdated sexist bullshit still on anyone's radar? Why is it anything more than a descriptor of someone's experience, whether they've actually had sex or not? Why should it matter so much whether someone remains a virgin? I mean, this crap is really damaging. It has a serious impact on self-esteem, especially for girls. And I happen to know this from personal experience. My sister and I were taught that our value as human beings hinged on our virginity, that once we'd been had, we were not as important or valuable or desirable anymore. So naturally, when you are molested at the age of 7, that does something to your psyche and your view of your own self-worth, especially when that negative view is shouted from the rooftops by your primary caregivers. An authoritative answer to these questions can come only from our Creator, Jehovah God. Why in the world would this be true? This might come as a shock, but Jehovah hasn't technically ever had sex. If you believe in the Bible, and come to think of it, he hasn't been the best communicator in history either. In fact, he is silent and invisible. So how could he give an authoritative answer on anything? And why should we trust his answers as delivered by the Watchtower? Do we have any proof whatsoever that what they say actually comes from God, or that God exists at all? No, we do not. And in his word, he tells us to flee from fornication. Run away! Just what does that mean? The Greek word translated fornication is not restricted to sexual intercourse, but includes a variety of lewd acts.
My!
So if two unmarried people engage in oral sex or in fondling each other's reproductive organs, they are guilty of fornication. You're not allowed to touch each other, even if you both want to, and you're doing it in private. Y'all, sex between consenting adults hurts no one. It does not impact anyone except the participants if we are talking about two single adults. Now, if there's cheating involved, there are other issues. But the point here is that sex by itself is not a crime. It's normal and natural and perfectly okay. This right here is about control and nothing more. It's about making followers feel guilty and wrong and bad and in need of redemption. Watchtower is here creating a problem so that they can be the solution. Also, is this wording creepy? Reproductive organs. Makes me think of the uterus and ovaries and things. You know, like reproductive organs. I think what they probably meant here are sexual organs, but whatever. But could they still be considered virgins? That is, in God's eyes? Who cares? In the Bible, the word virgin is used as a symbol of moral purity, but it is also used in a physical sense. The Bible tells of a young woman named Rebecca. It says that she was a virgin and no man had had sexual intercourse with her. Well, wait a minute. Then what does virgin actually mean? If it had said that she was a virgin because no man had had sexual intercourse with her, then okay, that would make sense. But the "and" almost implies that virginity and sexual intercourse were two completely different things. I also think it's interesting how this is worded to completely remove any agency on her part. No man had sex with her, instead of she never had sex. It's subtle, but there's a pretty serious difference there. Interestingly, in the original Hebrew, the word for intercourse evidently included other acts besides normal man-woman intercourse. So according to the Bible, if a youth engaged in any form of fornication, he or she could hardly be considered a virgin.
My.
And here we see Watchtower skillfully moving the goalposts, using one of their favorite words, evidently. They say evidently when they are about to tell you something that they totally made up. First of all, the dictionary defines a virgin as a person who's never had sexual intercourse. It can also refer to a person who is naive, innocent, or inexperienced in a particular context. As an adjective, it refers to something that is not yet touched, used, or exploited, and I expect that this is probably behind my mother's view that once a girl loses her virginity, she's like a crumpled up piece of garbage and has to take whatever she can get in life. Gag. Anyway, in this paragraph, Watchtower is attempting to assert that if you've done anything sexual at all, you are no longer a virgin in the eyes of God, and you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Because they want us all to be guilty and ashamed at all times. It's easier to control us that way. But y'all, Watchtower has no room to set themselves up as morally superior to anyone ever. They have a truly sordid past if you do any research at all. The Bible exhorts Christians to flee, not only from fornication itself, but also from all forms of unclean conduct that could lead to it. Others may ridicule you for taking such a stand. You don't know what you're missing, is what I heard all through high school, says a Christian youth named Kelly. Oh, good grief. People aren't going around telling Jehovah's Witnesses they need to have sex. Look, I can see if Kelly here was in a relationship with someone and refused to put out when everybody else at her high school was sexually active. But I think ridicule might be focused more on how the stand is taken rather than the stand itself. I mean, if Kelly was upfront and normal about it, as in, I don't want to have sex before marriage, I don't think it would be that big of a deal, really. However, if she made a big scene out of it, Watchtower style, and proclaimed to the world at large that she needed to remain morally clean and pure before Jehovah, and would retain her chaste and exalted virginity until she walked down the aisle at the Kingdom Hall, well, she might get made fun of a little bit, especially if she was a regular good Jehovah's Witness girl who preached to everyone all the time. Also, I will say that I was this girl through much of my high school career. I dated a boy for, my God, like 2 years and wouldn't put out. And I'm sorry, dude. I'm really sorry.
However, premarital sex is nothing more than the temporary enjoyment of sin. It can cause lasting physical, emotional, and spiritual harm.
What? Oh my God. Having safe, consensual sex with an appropriate partner is not going to cause you physical harm. Emotional harm might be the result of a failed relationship, but that's kind of how humans are supposed to learn and grow. And I think that the majority of the emotional harm caused for Jehovah's Witnesses in a situation like this is the guilt and shame heaped on them by their religion. As for spiritual harm, well, it does kind of fuck you up to be told that the almighty creator of the universe is disappointed in you because of the biology he supposedly created.
The Bible tells us that King Solomon once observed a young man being seduced into premarital sex. Solomon compared the young man to a bull that comes even to the slaughter. A bull that is to be butchered seems to have no idea what is about to happen to it. Young ones who engage in premarital sex often behave similarly. They seem to show little or no awareness that there are serious consequences to their actions. Solomon said of that young man, he has not known that it involves his very soul. Yes, your soul, your life is at stake.
Wow, there's a lot here. Wow. First, why was Solomon just observing this young man's seduction? Was he some kind of sicko? And if he knew that something terrible was about to happen to this guy, as Watchtower seems to be trying to imply here, then why wouldn't Solomon, who is supposedly the wisest man in the world, not do something to stop him? Second, how can they even begin to compare a consensual sexual experience with the slaughter of livestock? I mean, seriously, what the fuck? And third, they are actually telling their vulnerable young people here that if they have sex, which is a normal and natural biological drive, by the way, they will die. This is nuts, y'all.
For example, each year millions of youths contract sexually transmitted disease. When I found out I had herpes, I wanted to run away, says Lydia.
Yeah, that's not going to help, honey.
She laments it is a painful disease that will never go away.
Shocking. Yes, it is. And that's why it's better to teach young people about sex and STDs and consent. You know, sex ed, so that they can protect themselves from things like this. Abstinence-only sex education does not work. Biology will win every single time. And kids who have been taught the guilt and shame method of contraception are usually the ones who end up with STDs and pregnant at 16. I'm just saying.
Over half of all new HIV infections worldwide, 6,000 a day, occur among those who are between 15 and 24 years of age.
That's right, kids. If you have sex, you are absolutely going to die a horrible death. But somehow marriage cancels all that and is supposed to remove the guilt and shame that has been ingrained in you since birth. It's magic or something.
Females are particularly vulnerable to a host of problems related to premarital sex. In fact, the threat of STDs as well as HIV is higher for females than for males.
Oh my. Okay, technically, this is true, but they're not telling you the whole story here. STDs may present differently in women, with some common infections like chlamydia and gonorrhea being asymptomatic and thus never treated, which is a problem. And if they're never treated, they can cause long-term health effects like infertility, pelvic inflammatory disease, things like that. Also, vaginas are much more comfortable to bacteria than boxer shorts are, so the bacteria are more likely to be able to survive in there. And the skin of the penis is much thicker than the skin in the vagina, so there's that. So if women have more complications from STDs than men do, it's because women's bodies are more complicated. And none of these issues is related solely to premarital sex. These same things can happen if you're married too.
If a young girl becomes pregnant, she places herself and her unborn child at further risk. Why? Because a young girl's body may not have developed to the point of being able to handle childbirth safely.
Damn, how young are they talking here? Holy shit.
Even if a teen mother escapes severe health consequences, she must still face the serious responsibilities that parenthood brings. Many girls find that fending for themselves and for a newborn infant is far more difficult than they imagined.
Yeah, no shit. That's why we should teach them how to safely avoid getting pregnant before they're ready. You know, Allow them to have some agency and control over their own bodies? And don't you love how it's not quite, but almost explicitly stated that a girl who gets knocked up before marriage is on her own? Because if she's a Jehovah's Witness, it's shunning city the minute she starts showing. How lovely and supportive Jehovah's people are.
Then there are the spiritual and emotional after effects. King David's sexual sin endangered his friendship with God and nearly led to his spiritual ruin. And while David recovered spiritually, he suffered the consequences of his sin for the rest of his life.
Okay, first of all, we've talked about King David before, and he didn't suffer the consequences. His children and his wives and everyone around him did. Secondly, a one-sided friendship with a being who gives no indication that they actually exist is hardly the most important thing in your life. Is that really going to change what you have for lunch? I didn't think so. And then there's the fact that the spiritual and emotional after effects they're talking about here, namely guilt, shame, and complete ostracism, are things that are actually caused by the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Young ones today can suffer similarly. For example, when she was only 17 years old, Sherry became physically intimate with a boy. She thought he loved her.
Well, who says he didn't? Did she love him? I mean, there's not enough information here.
Years later, she still regrets her actions. She laments, "I took Bible truths for granted and suffered the consequences. I lost Jehovah's favor, and that was devastating."
Now imagine doing something as a teenager that causes guilt, shame, and deep regret for the rest of your life. What kind of a something would that be? Killing someone? No. Consensual sexual activity with someone you care about. That will ruin your life. Bollocks, I say. Also, do you notice here that they say loss of Jehovah's favor is devastating? How would you actually know that you'd lost his favor since he is silent and invisible? Well, if you guessed because everyone you know, including your family, shuns and ostracizes you, you'd be right on the money. Being shunned is devastating. But I would argue that it's not actually a loss of divine favor. It's actually a loss of Watchtower favor. And I think there's probably a real big difference. Or there would be if God was real.
A youth named Trish similarly admits, "Premarital sex was the biggest mistake of my life. I would do anything just to be a virgin again." Yes, emotional wounds can linger for years, causing stress and heartache.
Why? Look, being a virgin is no great shakes, y'all. Don't you remember? Why would Trish want so badly to be a virgin again? Because, as my mother taught me and my sister, a woman's worth is directly proportionate to her sexual experience. If she has had sex, she's damaged goods, right nigh on worthless in Jehovah's Witness land, and she's probably been disfellowshipped, and even if she has been reinstated, Trish likely has a reputation now, and the super spiritual brothers won't look twice at her. Unless she's uncommonly attractive. She will forever be an object of gossip in the congregation no matter what she does from now on. Emotional wounds indeed. But these wounds are Watchtower inflicted, y'all. This is not normal or okay. This is culty. Yes, cult.
Young Shonda raises an important question. Why would God give young people sexual desires knowing that they should not use them until after marriage?
Great question, Shonda. You're on your way to being an apostate one day. We'll leave the light on for you.
It is true that sexual desires can be particularly strong during the bloom of youth. In fact, teenagers may experience sudden sexual arousal for no seeming reason. But this is not something wicked. It is a normal part of the development of the reproductive system.
Exactly. So why demonize it and treat it like some grave sin, Jehovah's Witnesses?
It is also true that Jehovah designed sexual relations to be pleasurable.
Oh my God. I am so triggered right now. Pleasurable is a loaded word for sure. Anytime the witnesses say it, you know you're about to depart on a guilt trip. Recreation can be pleasurable, but you should go door to door instead. Sex with your Jehovah's Witness spouse can be pleasurable, but you must restrict it to approved methods or face consequences. Or forget about any other kind of sensual pleasure. You should feel horrible and guilty. Now, go read a Watchtower.
This was in harmony with his original purpose for humans to populate the earth. Nevertheless, God never intended for us to misuse our procreative powers.
Misuse? You mean like raping someone or like child sexual abuse? No. That's not what they mean. They are referring to consensual activity between consenting individuals here. Let that sink in.
To act upon every sexual desire would be, in a sense, as foolish as hitting someone each time you felt anger.
I just love how there are only these extremes as a Jehovah's Witness. Like you are either completely celibate or you're running around humping anything that stays still long enough. This is so stupid. I mean, nobody's advocating that you act on every single sexual thought you have. That would be gross. That would be time consuming for one thing. I mean, you'd be exhausted.
Sexual relations are a gift from God, a gift that is to be enjoyed at the appropriate time, when one is married.
Then why does he bestow the gift on teenagers? I mean, why didn't he make sexual desires dormant until two people had walked down the aisle or jumped the broom or whatever? He could have done that, you know. And if I think of a better and more efficient way to solve the problem than the supposed almighty creator of the universe, well, that ought to tell you something.
How does God feel when we try to enjoy sex outside of marriage?
You know what? I am not responsible for God's feelings. Your feelings are your own responsibility, big guy.
Well, imagine that you have purchased a gift for a friend. Before you can give it to that friend, he or she steals it. Wouldn't you be upset? Imagine then how God feels when a person engages in premarital sex, abusing the gift that God has provided.
Whoa, hold on there. This is absolutely nuts. First of all, what kind of friend steals things from you? But that's not the point here. They are saying that using your own body in the way that nature intended is stealing from God. That is batshit crazy. You cannot steal something that already belongs to you, and your own body, above everything else, belongs to you, and only you. And another thing, what is marriage anyway, and why does it activate the sexual magic on contact? I mean, it's basically just a legal ceremony. Sign some papers, say some words, you're married. Think about, what did people do before there were courthouses and magistrates and priests and churches and kingdom halls? Before all these man-made things existed, when humans were first populating the earth like Jah supposedly intended, how did they get married? How could they make sure that they weren't making Jehovah cry with their weenies? Did they just decide that they were married? So effectively they just decided they would have sex with someone and then they did it?
What should you do about your sexual feelings?
Turn them off like a light switch. Beat yourself into submission. Oh, no, don't beat yourself. That leads places. Give yourself hang-ups and sexual issues that require serious therapy to get past.
Put simply, learn to control them. Remind yourself that Jehovah himself will not hold back anything good from those walking in faultlessness.
So in other words, just trust that the Watchtower knows what's good for you better than you do and believe that sex is no good anyway. Being perfect and faultless is better, lonelier, more depressing, bleaker, but better, damn it.
When I find myself thinking that premarital sex would not be so bad, says a youth named Gordon, I reflect on the bad spiritual consequences and realize that no sin is worth the loss of my relationship with Jehovah.
Okay, I could be wrong here, but something tells me that Gordon isn't exactly beset with opportunities to have premarital sex. I'm just saying. And we really should decode this quote. What he's actually saying is, when I get horny, I remember that if I do the deed with my girlfriend, either she or I will feel horribly guilty and go tattle to the elders. We'll be dragged before a judicial committee where we will have to give a blow-by-blow account to every touch, every sigh, every thrust, and then we'll be disfellowshipped and shunned by everybody we know, including our parents, who, depending on our ages, we may still have to live with. And we might be told that we have to get married or break up. So no girlfriend anymore either, most likely. Having sex isn't worth losing literally everything else in your life. While that may be true, it's blindingly, astoundingly unnecessary.
Exercising self-control may not be easy.
Especially when you can't even masturbate to relieve the pressure.
But as young Adrian reminds us, it leaves you with a clean conscience and a good relationship with Jehovah, free to focus on the more important things, with no guilt or remorse for past actions. There are many good reasons for you to abstain from fornication in all its various forms. Admittedly, this is not always easy. A future article will address practical ways in which you can preserve yourself chaste.
That future article is also in the Awake in 2004, and it's called,
How Can I Avoid Premarital Sex?
Here's a more important question. Why would you want to? I mean, this makes it sound like premarital sex is just flying around everywhere, like the flu or something. You know, I just thought of something. They're so very specific here, saying premarital sex. But what if you've been married before, but then you're widowed or divorced? Then can you have sex? I mean, technically it's not premarital anymore because you've been married before.
No, of course you can't.
At age 19, I had sex with a boy from school.
Oh my.
I can't tell you how bad it made me feel. I was left feeling worthless, says Lacey.
Oh, Lacey, honey. Why would you feel worthless because you did something you were biologically coded to do, and which presumably felt nice. Oh wait, you're Jehovah's Witness, aren't you?
Flee from fornication, commands the Bible.
The fornication is coming! Run away!
Few young ones today, however, seem willing to obey the Bible's words and refrain from sex until they are married.
Probably because biology is more compelling than the Bible.
Some, like Lacey, have given in to their desires and have suffered pain and a troubled conscience.
Because the Jehovah's Witnesses have brainwashed them to do so.
Admittedly, it is not easy to control one's sexual urges. As the textbook Adolescent Development observes, the hormonal changes of puberty inevitably result in accompanying increases in sexual impulses. Admits Paul, at times, thoughts about sex enter my mind without any apparent cause or reason.
This is completely normal. Sexual urges are completely normal. Now, I agree that you actually do need to develop some modicum of control over them because nobody wants to see you whipping it out in public or anything, but thought control is really not necessary here.
Yet Professor of Pediatrics Howard Coolin notes, it is a great oversimplification to blame adolescent behavior solely on hormones. He explains that social factors also play a role. Indeed, social factors, particularly the influence of peers, can be very persuasive.
Social factors, like being a Jehovah's Witness, can also cause severe anxiety over things that are actually completely normal.
In her book, A Tribe Apart, writer Patricia Hirsch says that young people have built their own community. More than a group of peers, it becomes in isolation from adults, a society with its own values, ethics, rules.
This quote has a big ol' ellipsis in it, which in Watchtower publications often indicates that they've left something out that often changes the meaning of the original quote. I found the book, but I didn't have time to read the whole thing to search for this exact quote. If you feel like doing it, it's available on Amazon. Anyway, teenagers don't feel like hanging out with their parents, and maybe vice versa. Somehow that doesn't seem like a newsflash to me.
However, the ethics and rules of many young ones today often promote indulging sexual impulses, not controlling them. Many may thus feel pressured to try premarital sex.
As we've already noted, Jehovah's Witnesses have no business casting shade on anybody else's ethics. They fail so spectacularly at ethical behavior that this is laughable.
Even so, Christian youths are wisely determined to avoid all forms of fornication, knowing that God condemns it as one of the works of the flesh. How, though, can you remain chaste in the face of great pressures?
More importantly, why is this so imperative? Why is chastity such a big deal? Well, because controlling sexuality is a very good method of controlling everything else about a person's life. The control of sexuality and sexual activity is found in nearly every cult there is. Chastity is about control in every sense of the word. And I'm not talking about self-control here.
Having meaningful relationships with your parents can be particularly rewarding. Recalls Joseph, my parents definitely helped me to resist the pressures to experiment with sex.
Healthy relationships with your parents are indeed important. And I've heard they can be rewarding, though I wouldn't personally know. My mother was mentally ill and pretty emotionally abusive toward me, and my father was largely absent during my childhood and shuns me now. So I got nothing. But I question the appropriateness of parents being actively involved in the sex lives of their offspring. Parents should teach their children about sex in an age-appropriate manner, including safety and the truth about how biology works. But this just sounds creepy to me because I know what it's like to be grilled endlessly about what you have done and haven't done, what kids at school are doing and talking about doing, how excruciatingly embarrassing and damaging that is. And I knew very few born-in Jehovah's Witnesses who have healthy relationships with their parents or healthy attitudes about sex. Coincidence? I think not.
Indeed, godly parents can provide structure and boundaries for you that are based on God's word. They can support you in your efforts to remain chaste.
Structure? Yeah, maybe too much so. Meetings, service, studying for meetings and service doesn't leave much time for anything else really. But boundaries? No. Watchtower doesn't really understand what boundaries are because they're equating boundaries with rules here, I think. Because Jehovah's Witnesses aren't really allowed to have personal boundaries. Your every move is fodder for public discussion. Your body, your thoughts, your everything are open to critique and questioning in there. And if you tell them to back off and butt out, you're going to get even more of the most unwelcome attention because you're not submissive if you're a woman or you're trying to hide something. Actual boundaries are a no-no in there.
Granted, speaking to them about sexual matters may be awkward at first, but you may be surprised at how well they understand what you are feeling. After all, they were young once themselves. Sonia, therefore, advises other young ones, go to your parents and don't feel embarrassed or ashamed to talk about sex.
No! I mean, If you have normal parents or you have a decent relationship with them, go right ahead. But there ain't no way I would have done this. No way, no how. First of all, I did not want to get my mother talking about sex again. Ugh. And you already know what they're going to say. They're going to say, oh no, don't do it. It's wrong, and you'll be stained and used forever if you do it. Doing this would have opened me up to even more scrutiny, and I had precious little privacy as it was. With that said, I do want my children to feel comfortable coming to me with any questions that they might have, and I will do my best to respond appropriately and helpfully and non-judgmentally. But then, I'm not a Jehovah's Witness, so
what if your parents don't follow Bible standards? While still honoring them, you may need to seek some guidance from outside your family.
So you should only go to your parents if they're going to follow the party line. Worldly parents are useless unless the bills need to be paid anyway, right, witnesses?
Paul, quoted earlier, says, I get great help in this area from mature Christian married couples.
Oh my God. Can you imagine this? A horny, socially stunted teenager comes to you and starts asking questions about your sex life. I mean, this is creepy as fuck and really inappropriate. I mean, I feel like this could be a red flag and even open the door to sexual abuse of the kind we saw in the Oxygen special recently, which, by the way, I thought about doing a response video, but I just couldn't do it. It's too raw.
Kenji, a young girl whose mother is an unbeliever, likewise says, for advice, I stick to mature ones who are spiritually upbuilding. But she cautions, I avoid those who lack strong moral standards, even if they claim to share my religious beliefs.
How would you know if they lack moral standards, though? Oh, have they been disfellowshipped or reproved before? What's the gossip about them? And this just illustrates what we talked about a few minutes ago. If they've made a mistake or broken the Jehovah's Witness rules in the past, they are blemished forever and you should avoid them. Nice.
At times, it may be necessary to watch your association within the Christian congregation.
Watch them do what exactly? Watch and learn, kids. Watch and learn.
The Bible reminds us that in any large group, there will often be some who do not conduct themselves honorably. What should you do if you discover that some of the youths in your congregation in effect hide what they are? Avoid close association with such ones and seek out friends who will support your determination to stay morally clean.
And you know, I'm surprised they skipped the exhortation here to report those sinners to the elders, because that's actually what you're expected to do. Now, I agree with maybe not becoming close friends with someone who's doing something harmful, like somebody that has a hard drug habit or something like that. But this is really ridiculous. You can't develop real friendships when there's no trust, and you cannot trust anyone in this kind of an environment.
You should also take steps to protect yourself from the flood of sexual images and innuendos that are dispensed through books, magazines, music videos, video games, movies, and the internet.
Don't forget the Kingdom Hall. There are tons of articles, talks, books, and things with sexual content from Watchtower, and most of it is disturbing in the extreme, as you may have noticed in this video series.
The media portray premarital sex as glamorous, enjoyable, and risk-free. The effect, Kenji, quoted above, admits, I watched a show where sex was treated casually and even had homosexual overtones. As a result, I began to forget how seriously Jehovah views these matters.
The horror! Look, if Jehovah's views are so all-important, then why are they so easy to forget? Seriously, the girl watched a TV show and completely forgot her raising. Lost her ever-loving mind? Really? And I don't know, but I think I might prefer the media's portrayal of sex to the Jehovah's Witness one. Doom and gloom and guilt and shame and death. You make Jehovah cry, and he slaughters everybody at Armageddon. I mean, dang. I'll take glamorous and enjoyable and risk-free. Thanks. Also, everyone should know that TV sitcoms aren't real.
The truth is, popular entertainment often cleverly masks the unpleasant realities of premarital sex, unwanted pregnancies, premature marriages, and sexually transmitted diseases. So do not be taken in by those who are saying that good is bad and bad is good.
Guys, they're not cleverly masking anything. If you don't want to get pregnant, use contraception. If you don't want to get married young, then don't. But the Jehovah's Witnesses here are cleverly masking the unpleasant reality that the premature marriages are often their own doing, because the elders are often the ones demanding that a young couple who has taken a roll in the hay before a walk down the aisle get married immediately. Oh, and STDs? Condoms. The whole time, every time, I'm just saying. It doesn't have to be horribly dangerous and scary and bad the way Jehovah's Witnesses portray it.
If you come upon sexually suggestive or arousing images while reading, surfing the net, or watching TV, take immediate action.
I am sorry, brothers. You were saying?
Close that book, shut down your computer, or switch channels. Then focus your thoughts on something else, something wholesome. By doing so, you can halt wrong desires before they have time to grow.
That's right. Anything arousing or sexual at all. Turn it off. Focus on something wholesome like, I don't know, cheese? Animals? Maybe not. Read a Watchtower. No. That's not wholesome enough. Way too many articles like this one. But sexual repression breeds sexual obsession because sex is biology. It's not going to go away. So keep stuffing those feelings and eventually they're bound to come out. Eventually, everything starts looking suggestive. And people who've been raised this way often have zero control when they find themselves actually in a sexual situation.
Are you dating someone? Then there is a need for you to be on guard. The Bible warns us the heart is more treacherous than anything else and is desperate.
That's right. You don't know what's best for you, and you should ignore your heart and your inner voice and listen only to Watchtower.
It is easy to allow displays of affection to turn into sexual misconduct.
Whoa, horse. Sexual misconduct is a broad term encompassing any unwelcome behavior of a sexual nature that is committed without consent or by force, intimidation, coercion, or manipulation. Sexual misconduct does not refer to consensual sexual activity, people. Sexual misconduct is rape. Rape is not a result of displays of affection. This is incredibly stupid and incredibly unfortunate for Jehovah's Witness youth raised to think this way.
Take reasonable precautions such as having a suitable chaperone or dating in wholesome groups. Avoid being alone in tempting situations.
This is actually the best way to ensure that you don't actually get to know a prospective spouse until it's too late and you're stuck with them forever. You can kind of get to know someone in a group setting, but in order to make a commitment like marriage, you gotta have some kind of alone time. Even if you don't have sex before getting married, which I think is a mistake, you at least have to have had a few real private conversations. I mean, come on. If you ever wanted to know, though, why so many Jehovah's Witness marriages are miserable failures, here it is.
Perhaps, though, you are engaged to marry and feel that some physical displays of affection would be appropriate. Even so, a WHO report warns when marriage is imminent, premarital sex seems to occur among the majority of women, even in conservative settings. Therefore, set limits on displays of affection and thus protect yourself from needless heartbreak.
Why is there an automatic assumption that if you have sex before marriage, there will be heartbreak? Well, it's because the Jehovah's Witnesses are going to do everything they can to break your heart and destroy your life if they find out. That's why.
Shocking though it may seem, many youths, especially young girls, are forced or coerced into having sex.
Yep. And this is even harder for Jehovah's Witness girls because they've been taught to be submissive. So they're pre-groomed victims. And because the witnesses will victim blame anytime they can.
According to one study, 60% of U.S. adolescent girls who had sex before age 15 did so involuntarily. Perpetrators often use power to overwhelm their victims.
Yeah, that's kind of the definition of force, dingbats.
For example, the Bible tells us that King David's son Amnon fell in love with his half-sister Tamar and through trickery forced her to have sex.
So in the Bible, this dude named Amnon got the hots for his half-sister, the sick fuck, and he raped her. There. I fixed it for you. This sentence is utterly unnecessary and only serves to show Jehovah's Witness perpetrators that incest and rape are normal behaviors. This is further backed up by the rather glaring fact that they define consensual sex as sexual misconduct and treat rape and incest as run-of-the-mill.
This does not mean that it is impossible to prevent rape or coerced sex.
Why would they think it's impossible to prevent? You mean because the witnesses will always blame the woman? Or because they don't understand what sexual misconduct is? Or maybe this is just more stupidity? I think maybe that's the answer.
By being alert to danger, avoiding compromising circumstances, and taking quick action when there is a threat, you can do much to protect yourself.
So notice how they're making this the victim's problem? I mean, I'm all for self-defense and all, but shouldn't they also be telling men not to rape anyone? Shouldn't that at least be part of the conversation? The rest of this article is just a bunch of drivel about unifying your heart with Watchtower or some such. Let's move on to our final article for this episode from The Awake in 2006. It's called,
Does Romantic Love Justify Premarital Sex?
I mean, I would hope it's romantic love and not like brotherly love or the kind of love I have for martinis with blue cheese olives.
In one survey, almost 90% of teenagers polled felt that premarital sex is not wrong when the two parties love each other. This thinking is reflected in and often condoned by the media. Television and films routinely portray sexual activity as a normal result of romantic attachment.
That's because it is a normal result of a romantic attachment. In fact, a romantic relationship, especially between teenagers with no sexual element, is really, really unusual. Besides that, how boring would it be if TV and movies always followed Jehovah's Witness rules for all the characters? I mean, no sex, no drugs, no facial hair, no fun clothes, not so much as a well-placed expletive or a sincerely whispered fuck. No conflict, no drama other than gossip, and the only allowable competition is over who gets the most field service hours or places the most magazines, which gets real old real fast. Boring as hell, if you ask me.
Of course, those who want to please God do not look to the world for guidance, recognizing that it reflects the thinking of its ruler, the devil.
Oh my God. So everything in the world that isn't directly out of Watchtower is of the devil. You heard it here. This is what they believe. This is how they really feel about everyone and everything in the outside world. Are you still wondering whether it's okay to call them a cult? It is.
They also take care not to be governed purely by their feelings, knowing that the heart is more treacherous than anything else and is desperate. Rather, those who are truly wise look to the Creator and to His inspired word for direction.
Right, because as witnesses, we don't have any actual feelings that weren't implanted by Watchtower, and our inner voices, our guts, our innate knowledge of what's right, what's okay with us, all of that's been ripped out and thrown away and replaced by brainwashing. Sure. That's healthy.
When a man and a woman unite in wedlock, they become one flesh, as it were.
No, you don't. I mean, you're a unit, but you're still two separate people. You don't suddenly become some sort of collective.
When two unmarried people have sexual relations, also called fornication, they too form one body, but one that is unclean in God's eyes.
Actually, guys, they're still really two bodies. They're just really, really close together. And again, if God thinks this is so unclean, why did He make us this way?
What is more, such unions are unloving. How so?
I got nothing. This is absurd.
For one thing, fornication is sex without genuine commitment.
How could they possibly know this? And why does commitment have to be a prerequisite? I mean, what if neither party wants to get married or have babies together? What if all they want is to have some fun and relieve some stress? I mean, if they're responsible about it and they're both consenting, then what's the big deal?
And besides undermining self-respect, it can result in disease, unwanted pregnancy, and emotional pain.
Actually, I have enough self-respect at this point in my life to understand that I have this thing called agency, which means that nobody but me gets to decide whether I want to have sex. My self-respect does not depend on some arbitrary set of rules made by a bunch of dirty old men in New York. And I will repeat again that married sex can also result in disease, unwanted pregnancy, and emotional pain, depending on the situation.
Above all, it violates God's righteous standards. Hence, fornication reflects little or no regard for the present and future welfare and happiness of the other person.
Look at this logical leap into an abyss of stupidity. Most people who are in a relationship and are in love with their partners have sex because they have high regard for the other person and want them to be well and happy. Sex is a happy thing, unless you were raised a Jehovah's Witness. And then you need therapy. But it should be a happy thing. Makes me happy.
For a Christian, fornication is also an encroachment upon the rights of his or her spiritual brother or sister.
Wait, what?
For example, professed servants of God who indulge in sex outside marriage bring uncleanness into the Christian congregation.
What does that mean? Well, they used to say when I was a kid that if things weren't going well in a congregation, it was probably because somebody in the congregation was engaging in some secret sin. So if someone was sleeping with their fiance, they could cause Jehovah's spirit to leave the congregation and the devil might just come tiptoeing in. And all of a sudden, the elders are arguing about things instead of harmoniously agreeing at every elders meeting. Sisters are unable to lose weight. Pioneers are unable to place as many magazines in the ministry. The sound system starts malfunctioning. Ministerial servants have visible hard-ons while carrying the mics. It's the devil, I tell you. And I'm sure that that's the same excuse they use for why all the rampant pedophilia is coming out now. The devil was loose in that kingdom hall. Wait, does that happen in every kingdom hall?
Also, they deprive the one with whom they commit fornication of a clean moral standing, and if the other person is single, of entering into a possible future marriage morally chaste.
Come on, y'all. This means absolutely nothing. You aren't an unclean failure of a person if you have sex without their blessing. This is bullshit.
They also stain the good record of their own family, as well as wrong the family of their sexual partner.
What does your mama have to do with this? Seriously, who is keeping family records?
Well, sister, we would like to let you scrub the Kingdom Hall toilets, but your sister was disfellowshipped for fornication. Twice. And your family record is stained. So I'm going to have to give the toilet privileges to Sister Perline.
Y'all, there's not a whole lot of ideological difference between this and honor killings. The mechanics are different, but the ideas and the thinking are exactly the same.
Finally, they show a disregard for God, whom they have hurt by violating his righteous laws and principles. Jehovah, in turn, will exact punishment for all such bad deeds committed by unrepentant individuals. Is it any wonder, then, that the Bible tells us to flee from fornication?
Run away! Hurt Jehovah? What the fuck? We aren't cheating on him. We never agreed to this shit. If he were real and was so offended by your crotch, he could make it only work in the proper circumstances. The fact is, either he's not there or he doesn't want to. I mean, he could activate your reproductive system when a ring makes contact with your finger if he cared that much about it. But no. Instead, we get this ridiculous, immature testing bullshit.
Are you planning to marry? Then why not use your courtship to build a solid foundation of mutual trust and respect?
Yeah, that's what I thought we were doing.
Think, how can a woman fully trust a man who has shown himself lacking in self-control?
Well, you know, there's a difference between a man lacking self-control in general and being so in love with you that he can't keep his hands to himself. I mean, kind of like being irresistible myself. I trust a man who obviously loves me and wants me in every way a lot more than I would trust a man who won't touch me and expects me to submit.
And how easy is it for a man to cherish and honor a woman who disregards God's law in order to satisfy her romantic feelings or to please the man?
So he can't cherish and honor a woman who obviously loves and wants him because a silent, invisible, for all intents and purposes, non-existent entity might be pissed about it? Ladies, if this is your man, you might want to rethink that relationship.
Remember, too, that those who reject God's loving standards reap what they sow. He that practices fornication is sinning against his own body, says the Bible. True, if a couple who engaged in premarital sex truly repent, work hard to restore their relationship with God, and strengthen their trust in each other, negative feelings may eventually abate.
What negative feelings? Oh, the ones brought about by the Jehovah's Witnesses? Those negative feelings.
Still, their past conduct usually leaves a scar.
Premarital sex doesn't leave scars, unless you're really, really kinky. I mean, the way Jehovah's Witnesses treat you if they find out leaves a scar. Look, I'm telling you, Mr. Pfister and I engaged in copious quantities of premarital sexual activity, and we haven't had one single negative feeling about it. Not ever. Sex is awesome. It's amazing, but it's meant to be private and personal and between the participants, not the participants' families and their congregations. This is nuts.
One young couple who are now married bitterly regret having committed fornication. Are our marital disagreements somehow a result of this unclean foundation? The husband sometimes asks himself.
Wow, this guy's a dick. And that, my friends, is the takeaway from this whole series of articles. You know, it occurs to me that they have spent a lot of time and effort talking about how bad premarital sex is and how dangerous and how hurtful it is. Is there no other problem that is as serious and worthy of this much focus? Like, I don't know, child abuse or domestic violence? You know, things that actually have perpetrators and victims. Why are they so focused on controlling consensual, normal personal behavior that hurts no one and actually makes a lot of people very happy indeed? Well, you know my opinion.
Control!
That's it for this episode. And thanks for sticking with me on this one. It's a long one.
That's what she said.
Join me next time for episode number 15 of Sex in the Watchtower, where we delve into what Jehovah's Witnesses teach their very small children about sex. Bring a bucket. You're gonna need it. Until then, I'm Sister Pfister. This is crazy.